Welcome to the Sorcery Podcast, your sacred space to delve into spiritual tools, topics, and practices that will illuminate your path of soul remembering and healing. I'm your host, Ligia Costa, a soul guide, alchemist, soul writing coach, and the creator of the Trust Pathway. I'm deeply grateful to have you here with me. Together, we will embark on a profound exploration of self-discovery and healing, unlocking the secrets that lie within. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Sorcery Podcast. And I felt compelled to talk about the theme of this podcast for a while now, but perhaps because I've been going through some challenges in the past month or two, which are basically the same wounds repeating itself. And trust me, I've been working on these wounds for the past 10 years or so. But as we know, healing is a process, not a destination. And healing is like an onion. We heal one layer, we peel that layer, and then we heal another layer, and then another layer, and then another layer. So we can be healing the same wound for a lifetime. And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it gets frustrating. And I know I'm not alone in this. A lot of my clients share the same frustrations. I've seen other people in their healing journeys sharing the same frustration, which is, wait a minute, I thought I've healed this already. Why does it keep repeating, right? And I'm sure maybe you that are listening to this podcast resonated with it, with the title of it. It called to you. It rang true to you. So today I really want to explore this more, especially because our egos can get so wounded during this process that most times we feel like a failure. And that's what I want to address today with this conversation. We know that no person is 100% healed because healing is not linear. Right? We go backwards, we go forwards, and sometimes we are all over the place. But that is the process. And that is what makes healing actually exciting if we look from that perspective. However, there is so much pressure from our families, from our work environments, from the society, from social media to always have our shit together. Right? To always have it figured out. And I experienced this with this process of grief since I lost my dad, The first, I would say, 6 months to a year, people were quite understanding of my ebbs and flows because of the loss. But after that, it's quite like this expectation that I have to get over it just because it's been more than a year. And it doesn't work like that. Because as humans, we all go through seasons and ebbs and flows in our own cycles. And we don't have everything figured out. And we don't have to have everything figured out. And when it comes to us being healers or stepping into this soul mission of being healers as a profession, or even just, stepping into this mission of healing ourselves because we find it's time to break the cycle. We are integrating our own emotional turmoil. We are constantly doing our own deep inner work, right? And whilst we navigate our own healing journeys, we think we are done with healing certain lessons, that we are done overcoming certain challenges. But the truth is, they keep coming up. They keep coming. And it gets to a point that is draining. I don't know if you ever experienced this, but I certainly did. And it gets to a point like, oh, really? Not again? I thought I've done this already. But as I said previously, healing is a process that happens in layers. But yeah, isn't that exhausting when we keep getting the same nudges to heal the same thing over and over and over and over again? We get to a point that we are so ready to move on, and then boom, we get stopped in our tracks, as if like our spiritual guides go, you are still not ready. You still have work to do in here in order to move on. And when we go through those moments, when we realize, okay, this is happening again, that we get into this victim archetype, which is completely normal, by the way. But we get into this victim archetype where we kind of go through this moment where our vibration really lowers. It's like we take this deep fall and we notice more challenges or more obstacles coming in our way. And we just feel like we had enough, that we have no more capacity to work on this same thing. That is not fair that we are going through this whole thing again. And then we cry and we moan and we complain and we feel victimized without recognizing that healing is an up and down process and it's an evolution and cyclical experience. But at that moment, we can't see that. In that moment, all we are able to see and all what we are able to feel is this shame around the fact that things are still coming up. And then it brings up this feeling of being an imposter, because despite we've been working on this same pattern or this same wound for so long, we haven't healed that thing yet. And I know I'm not alone in this. I'm sure this has crossed your mind before, and that you probably caught yourself saying things like, I've done all this work and I should be healed by now. I can't believe this is still coming up after I've done X, Y, and Z things to heal it. And if you are a healer, if you do this from a profession like I do, you might say or think that I help people heal these things. How come I haven't healed it completely? Why am I still struggling? And even though it's completely valid what we are feeling, and this is what I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that what you are feeling is an overreaction or you shouldn't be feeling that way. You certainly have emotions and feelings that are valid, that feel true to you in that moment. And so it's important that you feel those emotions. It's important that you lean into those emotions, acknowledge them, honor them, instead of repressing or denying or push them away. And when you do that, when you do honor those emotions, unconsciously you go into this victim archetype, which is a natural human response. And it's a natural feeling, because feeling tired of these repeated initiations, it's normal and it's valid. But when I talk about being the victim archetype, I'm referring to the shadow archetypes that live in all of us. We all have it. And this is not the same as playing the victim. And let me clarify this. So, to me, being the victim archetype is being with these feelings of unfairness, of frustration, of blaming outside sources in that moment due to all of these emotions we are feeling. And again, this is a completely normal human response. This is where perhaps, especially if the wound is very activating, that you go into fight, flight, or freeze response, or even fawn response. And that will activate a lot of emotions related to that wound that will basically remind you of traumatic memories sometimes, and very painful memories where you just don't feel safe, and because you don't feel safe, you react to these experiences you're living now. And the normal human response to this is going into the victim archetype, where because we don't feel safe, we feel frustrated, we resist the challenges and the obstacles, we resist doing the work again, and we kind of blame everything outside of us, being people, being situations, being the cosmic situation with the planets. If it's eclipse season, if it's Mercury retrograde, we basically just project those things out of reaction. But this is normal, and when we have emotional intelligence and awareness around these emotions and these wounds that we are healing, we are able to then notice that we are in the victim archetype and then work on it, so we move out of this archetype into the golden shadow of this archetype, which is the sovereign. Now, this is different from playing the victim. Playing the victim is when you are in this vibration of scarcity and in this vibration of projecting and blaming and sometimes overreacting and bullying. It's all the same emotional responses as being the victim archetype, but you don't snap out of it. You just don't have the awareness. And you get so entangled in this, your ego gets so wounded that you just keep playing the victim. As in, poor me, this happened to me, and that's why I can't change the situation. That's why I can't face this anymore. That's why I snapped at you. And you basically don't take responsibility for how the situation is panning out in your life and your contribution to it. Because we all contribute to the situations, to the experiences, and we all have this responsibility to acknowledge that, right? To acknowledge our part in the situations. But when we are in the playing the victim emotional state, you just project and you don't take responsibility for anything. So the key here really is to have the awareness to do this inner work that really also involves analyzing what is our part in the situations and in the changes that we want to bring. Our part in staying the victim archetype and then it progressing into playing the victim, or our part into claiming our sovereignty and making the changes that are necessary. And also, if you are someone that has been given the gifts of sensitivity, if you are someone that gets very emotional, that is possibly an empath, that feels other people's emotions and feels things deeply, or you've been someone that has gone through some really hardships and some really hard initiations, every time an obstacle or an invitation comes your way, it is to serve you as a teacher. It is to help you heal deeper. It's to help you process the wisdom that comes from it. And one thing I know to be true, because of being in this space for a long time and why I keep seeing it over and over, is that those that are here to heal themselves, to heal the collective, even though they don't do this work but as a career, but they do it in their families, with their friends, just by being them and embracing these journeys and inspiring others to do the same. And also the creatives, they are the people that had the most difficult childhoods, or that went through some sort of illness and something traumatic growing up. And that it pans out during their lives because they feel so deeply, because they are so connected with their own emotions and the emotions of others. And so they get a lot of hardships during their lives, but it's just so they can heal deeper. It's just so they can heal this perhaps karmic pattern. But despite if you are a sensitive person or not, the important thing to remember is that you have the choice. You have the choice to let these triggers tell you how much of a failure you are, how weak you are, and show you how hard life is, or you get to choose to let the trigger be the teacher. And here is the important thing. This is when we move from the victim archetype to being the sovereign. Because instead of staying the victim and letting the trigger and the obstacle annoy you and frustrate you and discourage you and let it mean something about you as a person, which often translates into asking ourselves, what's wrong with me? Why am I a failure? I don't deserve to be free from this. And you can go down this rabbit hole of nurturing these narratives that if you didn't overcome and heal a certain pattern or a certain behavior or a certain wound from the past, that it means that you're not good enough, that it means that you are not actually doing the inner work properly, and that it must be really something wrong with you. Right? So this is when we feel in the victim archetype and we let these invitations mean something about ourselves as a person, right? So the key here is really to feel your emotions again. It's not about rejecting, dismissing, bottling them up or suppressing. No, do feel those emotions, but then get curious. Get curious about what the trigger is trying to teach you. What is the lesson? What else do you need to heal? And then move from this curiosity into acceptance. And it's not about accepting that you are failing or that you're not good enough. No, it's about accepting that if there is something that you are healing in your life, the lessons will still come up. Let that land for a second. It's about recognizing that if there is something that you are healing in your life, in this lifetime, the lessons will still come up. And it's about recognizing or accepting that if you do fall down the rabbit hole, you are probably addressing the triggers with the same level of consciousness that you were conditioned to have in your childhood, which basically tells you that you are not worthy. So when you recognize that if you do nurture these very toxic narratives about something being wrong with you as a person, you're basically engaging with these triggers consciously, but from a place of the wounded child, from a place of the condition that you went through as a child, which back then told you that you're not worthy. And so you're basically nurturing that narrative all over again. When you do believe that you are failing or that you're not enough or that you're not deserving to get rid of this pattern of this wound or whatever that might be in this lifetime, despite all the healing that you've been doing, and you make it mean something about you, you are making it mean about you that you're not worthy. You are continuing the exact pattern and wound that you've been trying to heal all along. The core of the wound, which is that you're not worthy. Because you're looking at it from the lens of what's happening and you are giving it a reason to say, I'm not worthy. What's wrong with me? What does this have to happen to me? I should be doing better. Be better. It's almost like having your strict or unloving parent or unloving carer shouting in your ear again all the things that were wrong with you. Or if you had a loving parent, maybe that voice is from a bully from school or a strict teacher that you had. Or it can actually be your own voice. Yes, because we can bully ourselves the very same way. If we are too hard on ourselves, sometimes that voice is the worst of all because you shamed yourself. And so that little child in you that is still seeking love and acceptance, and it's so vulnerable, especially when these wounds are being triggered again, you get so vulnerable. But then you step into the shoes of an abuser and you treat yourself the exact way you were trying to heal all this time. You are letting that voice be present in your life and you're just abusing yourself. The thing that you've been trying so hard to get rid of, to heal from, you are doing it in yourself. And this truth is really hard to swallow, but can be a game changer when we do realize that. And so when you do realize this truth, it just makes sense why the same lessons keep showing up. And part of the reason why you are still healing the same wounds is because of the patterns that you learn and that we had to adapt to survive. You are still treating yourself through the lenses of these patterns. When back then you didn't feel safe and you just had to find ways of protecting yourself. And so you built masks, you built coping mechanisms to keep you safe, to help you survive. And although we all go through this, right? So although we are healing and doing so much work on this for sometimes years, if the part of us that's wounded, it's still not feeling safe, the triggers will come back to teach us ways of healing that so we do feel safe. So we don't have to adapt to survive, but we can just be and take our place in the world. And so we can look to the situations not from the lenses of the wounded child, not from the lenses of the trauma response, but from the lenses of our healed selves. And so this should be the first thing that you need to address, is to look at what ways you are parenting yourself. And I have 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2, all about reparenting ourselves and the power of reparenting ourselves. So if you haven't listened to that, I really recommend you go back and check those episodes out. But yeah, the important thing is to offer patience to ourselves instead of being too quick to pointing fingers. Is to being compassionate to ourselves instead of blaming and shaming ourselves. Is to treat ourselves the same way we would treat our own children. And if you don't have children, you perhaps have so much unconditional love for a pet. You would never ever imagine yourself bullying and mistreating that child or that pet, or talk to that child and that pet the same way you are talking to yourself. When the same wound keeps being triggered and that presented to you over and over and over again, remember that is the universe basically telling you, let's try again. You are still shaming yourself. Let's try again. You are still blaming yourself. Let's try again. You're still afraid. Let's try again. You still not feel safe. Let's try again. So it is trying. And remember, like when you were a child, you might not remember, but you've possibly witnessed in your own children, right? That when you started to walk, you didn't know, like you did 1-2 steps and you would fall. But you never stopped trying. You got back up and you tried again and you tried again. So it's the same thing. It's the same invitation. Every time you trip and you fall, let's try again. Every time you feel wounded again, let's try again and heal this. So always remember, it's just the universe actually being a loving parent and encouraging you to move forward, to try again. And the second thing to address is the meaning that you are giving to the trigger or to the experience of being triggered. Okay, so stop making it mean something about yourself. And I know our brains are very, very clever and very, very persistent in doing this. But it's about recognizing that we are doing it and then change it. It's very, very easy to make something that is happening that we are not comfortable and that we not feel safe and maybe pressured. which again doesn't make us feel safe because it's requiring us to make a decision or make a change that we are not ready for. And yeah, our brain can very, very easily make that situation or that trigger mean something about ourselves, about our values, and about our worth. So the key here is really just to lean into the experience, because the lesson is not about shaming or blaming or hurting ourselves. It's to heal ourselves. That's the main lesson here. And every bit of healing that you do, it's a bit more that you open your heart. It's a bit more that you love yourself. It's a bit more that your capacity increases. It's a bit more that you leave. So when you feel triggered and the same wound shows up to you, just recognize the symptom. What is this trying to tell you? What is this signaling? And then how does this symptom manifest in your body? Does it manifest as pain and aches or flare-ups or mood swings? How is this signaling to your body? Because when a symptom shows up, is a trigger response from something you consciously or unconsciously experienced. And even though your mind might not remember what it was, your body certainly does. So you can try and analyze, for instance, your recent experiences or recent life events, so that you can find evidence as to why you're getting these symptoms, as to if something unconsciously perhaps triggered you. And if that trigger, it's something that might remember you from a past experience, or if it's a new trigger, a new something that happened that you were not prepared for. And be curious. Again, curiosity is so important when we are doing our inner work and in our healing journeys, because that keeps us excited. I like to compare this as being an archaeologist. And I must say, when I was little, that was the profession I wanted to go for. I've always felt drawn to finding artifacts and lost cities and meaning in the past. And so I find our healing journey is a lot like that. The more curious we are, the more the archaeologist in us gets excited and kind of like a detective to go and find for these artifacts, for these root reasons, for these ancient stories that basically live within us. And that's why I feel curiosity is really important, because we come from a place of excitement. It's another vibration. It's a positive vibration. It's like, I want to find this. I get to find this out. It's a choice. Rather than coming from a place of scarcity and not looking into things because you just don't want to see it. And so, yeah, just, be curious and look for the source of why this is happening and any familiar patterns that are showing up. And then search for the facts. Search for real evidence that tells you that you are safe, that counteracts that inner child that's still vulnerable and still seeking safety and love, and it's still residing in you. And because that inner child still doesn't feel safe, it's really important that you show that inner child that now, as an adult and in your life circumstances, you are safe. So look for proof of that. And then it's important that you regulate your nervous system. Once you have the awareness of what it is that is triggering you and how it feels in your body and what is the source of it, then it's really important that you calm your body so that you can feel that safety and feel safe in doing this process and integrating your healing. So things like resting, going outside in nature, walking barefoot on the grass or sand, exercising, meditation, shaking your body, just shaking your body helps a lot. Breath work, tapping, for instance. So all of these things are good ways to regulate your nervous system, to calm your body. And to finalize this episode, what I really, really want you to take away from this is that is nothing wrong with you. Absolutely nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you for haven't yet healed the pattern or the wound you have been trying so hard to heal for such a long time. Because what is now triggering is still a wound or is still an emotion that hasn't been processed yet. It doesn't mean it will never be. Yet. It still needs you to try again. And also, and this is really important, even though we go and look for the source and look for things in the past, and it's part of our healing journeys to look in the past so we can understand, why in the present moment we've been triggered, why we have these certain behaviors or certain blocks even in our lives. And it's important to go in the past to kind of be the archaeologist and look for it. But it's important to remember that no amount of looking at your past is going to compensate for the fact that you have the choice to make changes in your adult life. And what I mean by this is that looking at the past, yes, is beneficial when you don't have an awareness of the source of the wounding. When you start in your healing work, your inner work, and you are in that stage of investigating, you are in that stage of unraveling what happened and understanding what happened so that you can get awareness and you can use that awareness in the present. But after you understand why and what happened, persisting to look at the past for answers and reasons is not going to propel you forward. As a conscious adult, you now have the choice to look at your present life and not let the past dictate your destiny. You have the choice now to notice the emotional waves that come, and instead of swimming against the tide, trying to go back in the past, you just flow with them. You just let them be. So give yourself the grace and the permission to just be with these experiences. Because where you are right now is exactly where you are supposed to be. And that is great. Just don't take away from this moment. Celebrate this moment. You are where you are meant to be. And that's huge. You don't have to change anything, and certainly there is nothing wrong with you. Because even if you're tired, which I completely understand, tired and exhausted and frustrated with the same patterns coming up, and you kind of have to face the same wounding again, you are supposed to be in this situation right now. Because again, it's the universe inviting you to try again, to heal another layer. Because you will learn your lessons, and then you will grow, and then you will evolve, and then you will heal one layer at a time. And this is something that I've been facing myself, and I was faced with a lot of things that is hard to admit, right? So over the last 2 months, I've been going through a lot, and again, the same wound came into my life, and I didn't feel worthy because my inner child was so very present during these recent initiations that I felt like that little girl again, just trying to be understood and being shut down all the time. I couldn't speak, I couldn't explain myself without being shushed. And I felt that way again, like, people don't understand me. People don't let me explain. And part of me was going back to that place of trying to prove myself and trying to be heard. And that comes from the wound, that's when our self-worth is being affected. And I had to really look within and admit to myself, which was hard, but also kind of a purge came out of it when I did realize that I was in the victim archetype, and I was letting that, for weeks to dictate my mood, my health, my worth, my relationships. And when I did realize, oh my gosh, I've been in the victim archetype. Yes, I see what's happening here. Let me change this. And I haven't said this, but in the Unshakable Self-Worth course, I do touch about the victim archetype and the sovereign archetype, because is the basis, is the most activated archetypes when we are struggling with our sense of self, when we are lost in our sense of self, when our self-worth is really affected. And so I do have a class on these archetypes inside the Unshakable Self-Worth. So if you've been listening to my podcast episodes, I've been on and on and on about this amazing course that's still open for enrollment, and it's still in the promotional price. The price will increase in the future, but if you join now, anything that I change, any new classes that I put in, any new resources I add, you're not going to pay more for it. So you can lock it at the price that it is now and just get lifetime access to any new lessons and new improvements that I'll make in this course. And I will link the course in the show notes for you to check it out. But before I love you and leave you, I will pull a card from the Trust Journaling deck. And the card that came out is from the Thrive suite. And the soul inquiry is, what do I need to be thinking, believing, saying, or doing? What do I need to be thinking, believing, saying, doing? And the affirmation is, my potential is limitless. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I would love to hear your feedback regarding this conversation. If you ever felt like a failure or that you had enough of healing the same thing, let me know if this episode resonated with you. And you can send me a DM on Instagram, or you can send me an email or comment on my YouTube channel. Anything, anything. I really would like to know if this episode resonated with you and if it helped you as well, because that's the point of having these conversations. Thank you ever so much for listening, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you for listening to the Sorcery Podcast and for holding space for this conversation. It is truly magical to be able to walk with you on this journey of soul healing and inner transformation. If you resonated with this episode and found it valuable, I would be grateful if you could leave a review on iTunes. Your feedback helps me reach more souls searching for guidance and healing. For more guidance and soul wisdom to support soul awakening women through the journey of alchemy, please visit my website www.ligiacosta.co.uk. Love and healing to all. See you on the next one.